All right, I'm back. I'm back with the with more birthday celebrations, and this one is based on the member of the Von Erich dynasty, and this his name is David Allen Adkisson, who was also known as David Von Erich. This man was an American professional wrestler, and he is the member of the Von Erich family. This man is known for his appearances with a Dallas, Texas-based professional wrestling promotion that is owned by the late uh, Jack Adkisson, who's also known as Fritz Von Erich. And that is World Class Championship Wrestling, or WCCW for short. That's been around since the 70s and the 80s. The wrestling company been around since the 1970s and the 1980s. But it's out. It been out. It was before it became World Class Championship Wrestling. It was World Class. It was World Class Wrestling Association in the 1960s. You know, that company's been around since 1966, and its last in 1990. So Ed McElmore used to own that promotion. Ed McElmore. Ed McElmore used to own that promotion originally. That was in Fort Worth, Texas. That's in Dallas, Texas. Been headquartered in both towns in Texas. So that's where the story went. I'm gonna go take you to the early life right now, and we'll go tell you a story about this man. David was named after his mother, uh, Doris. His mother Doris Atkinson's brother. David who had only died months before David Von Erich was born in 1958. Doris's brother David, whose real name is Eugene David Smith, had died of a brain tumor at the age of 14. David, along with brothers Kevin and Kerry, loved to hunt and fish with their father Fritz. Uh, Hunting on the Von Erich Ranch was quite an event. The ranch was quite there. The ranch was like an event, though, quietly an event. Many of their relatives and friends who would join in on sometimes in the hunting group. It would be 20 or more. The main two people who were quite often among the group was 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 the referee for WCCW, David Manning, and there's an announcer for WCCW, have to be Bill Mercer. Bill Mercer. These two were quite among the group. That's what they both were, quite often among the group. David, see, his first love in life was raising horses. He likes to feed the horses, which that turned out to be very profitable for him. He raised and sold quarter horses and horses for show and made his own fortune that way, apart from the family business of wrestling. Adkisson Let me tell you about David Adkisson. He was a high school basketball star and a football player at a school that happened to be Lake Dallas High School. He won a scholarship at I think it was to I think he won a scholarship. Oh, the scholarship that he won was heading to when he won it at David what David would do. He wanted he won that scholarship at that point just to go to the NTSU. We'll go to the origins of it. It was already been known. It was so well known back in the day, back in the 1890s. It was used to be the University of used to be the UNT, the University of North Texas. They used to be around since the early 1890s. So, and this is where it became the NTSU, the NTSU. So that's what it's known for. Let me tell you about see this man have won a scholarship to North Texas State University to play the same thing that he wanted to play. He wanted to play the same shit that he wanted to play at Lake Dallas High School was basketball and football until the young the young David Adkisson dropped out to pursue a wrestling a wrestling career that he had started in the late 1970s. That was June 1977. And he had adopted the name David Von Erich. The name David Von Erich. That's what he adopted. Okay, and this is where his early professional wrestling career had started. From the late 1970s to the early 1980s. Adkisson, who's known as Von Erich, was considered a breakout star of his family, as his fiery temper produced memorable interviews that he would do. His first major match that was on August 15th, my mother's birthday. Uh, that was 1977. My mother was like, I don't know, my mother was a little girl then, you know. When David had wrestled who had to be Holy Race, who used to be the National Wrestling who had to be NWA is still around now. Had NWA power and a different you know, different adaptation, all the R's in it. And they had the power in the USA show, which is now on YouTube. Uh, David have I'm gonna tell you what David had done. He wrestled the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Holly Race, the late Holly Race, who happened to be a wrestler, a great wrestler, and a promoter and a trainer. You know what I mean? And people knew the story. He wrestled Race. He wrestled Holly. That man wrestled Holly to a draw, a 13-minute draw. David had made his first appearance in Missouri. in, was it February of 1979, and it was an instant hit with the fans and the promoters alike due to the popularity at the time. On May 27th of that year, David wrestled a NWA champion race in Missouri in a non-title match, and he defeated him with the Iron Claw. I think it was named the Von Erich Claw. It was a move. It was a wrestling move or finisher. That's what I tell you about the wrestling holds that wrestlers use. Cool numbers of set moves and pins are used by the performers just to immobilize their opponents or lead to a submission. So that's all there. Until late 1979, until, well, especially November of that period in 1979, David made his first and only appearance in the WWF, which was World Wrestling Federation, which was now World Wrestling Entertainment, the WWE, competing on a card against Davey O'Hannon at Madison Square Garden. In late 1981, David left Texas and struck out on his own. That's from the CWF, Championship Wrestling from Florida, from 81 to 82. Until November of 81, which was late 81, David left Texas and struck out on his own, heading to Florida and competing as a heel for the championship wrestling from what, Florida promotion. It was a wrestling promotion I did not know of. That was from Tampa. Uh, it was in Tampa, Florida, I think. In Tampa, Florida. David and I will tell you about David. David Von Erich. And guess who managed this guy? And who was in the same stable as guys like Kendo Nagasaki and Jimmy Garvin. Oh, we miss him too. I think miss him. And then guess who's managing him? Guess who manages this man who was in the same stable as these guys? James Morrison, aka JJ Dillon. JJ Dillon, whose real name is James Morrison. Yeah, yes, David Von Erich was managed by JJ Dillon, and he was in the same stable as Kendo Nagasaki. Yeah, Kendo Nagasaki and Jimmy Garvin. David's mentor in Florida was would have to be Dory Funk Jr. And during that time, David teamed up with Dory or Terry Funk, Dory Funk's brother, the brother of Dory Funk. That man's been wrestling for years. You know. In addition to the singles competition, I've been wanting to tell you about this shit, man. I've been wanting to tell y'all about these singles competition. But I couldn't. I might have to tell you about this now. Why didn't I tell y'all people about this? I don't know. Why did I tell y'all this now? Until I waited to do it, to let this out. In addition to the singles competition, memorable opponents including guys like Barry Windham, Mr. Wrestling 2, Eric Embry, Sweet Brown Sugar, and the late Butch Reed. The late Butch Reed. By July of 1982, David was back in Texas. Well, it's gonna be bad tragedy for that. Feud in a feud with and let me tell you about this in world class championship wrestling in 82 and 84, 1982 and 1984. Well, it was deriving from the WCWA, the World Class Wrestling Association, in the 60s. So he feuding with gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, who has been deceased. During his stay in Florida during his stay, David met and became great friends with the late Jimmy Garvin, convincing Garvin to come to the WCCW in Texas in early '83, and they created an angle for a feud, for a feud between the two. I mean them, which culminated with David winning the held up NWA Texas Heavyweight Championship, the NWA Texas Heavyweight Championship at the Tarrant County Convention Center. It's the TCCC, I think, on July 4th of '83. As a result of David's victory, Garvin and his valet Sunshine, that's a Garvin's valet, Valerie French, Valerie French, who who used to be a valet in wrestling, had to be Sunshine, were were forced to serve as David's valets for a day, one day, with the results of the day being broadcast on the WCCW weekly show. WCCW weekly show. The whole angle was conceived by David. It was conceived by David and Jimmy. They traded the Texas title back and forth several times. Well, they never even hot potatoed it. They wanted to hot potato that title so badly. Then that belt was held up several times, and when the feud reached its climax, that's reached the breaking point there on July 4th of 1983. It was time for both of those men to move on to the next part in their career. And it leaves out something. It says David continuing the Von Erich feud with the Freebirds and Garvin starting a feud with Chris Adams. With Chris Adams, we go into the and it's the same thing. It's the same thing that happened there in the fall of '82. In the fall of '82, I feel it was around September. That's why I was like an infant at the time when when WCCW was on television. In the fall of '82, 1982, David was also working behind the scenes in WCCW and helped create several angles. He invited the Fabulous Freebirds to come to the promotion. Michael Hayes, whose real name was Michael Seitz, Shawn Michael Seitz. Not I forgot Michael Seitz. Michael Hayes, whose real name was Michael Seitz, made his debut at the Sportatorium on Saturday, October. Was it? Was it like? I'm not thinking about this one. The 16th, on Saturday, October 16th of 1982, And Terry Gordy, rest in peace, man. Rest in peace to Terry Gordy. You know, made his debut too at the Sportatorium 2 weeks later, on around the end of October of '82, October 30th, as exact. Buddy Roberts did not show up. The Freebirds were initially booked as babyfaces. In the run-up to the Christmas Spectacular, Wrestling Star Wars, that was mixed with professional wrestling and Star Wars. It's a mix with that one. It was a spectacular uh, Wrestling Star Wars card that was at the reunion arena. That was on December 25th of 1982. That was around the Christmas time. In the final match to crown the first ever six-man champions, David took Buddy Roberts' place. He took the place of Buddy Roberts in the Freebirds against Tom Sharp, his brother, I think it was Mike Sharp and Ben Steele. I don't know if they were related. I don't know if Tom and Mike Sharp were related or whatnot. They're probably father and son or probably brothers. I don't know. I don't even know. I couldn't even tell. Ben Steele was one of those guys, He was a great wrestler. But it was David who had won the match and the title. But in a ringside interview right after the bout, David gave his third of the title to Buddy Roberts. Later that evening, David's brother Kerry battled the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair in a steel cage alongside Michael Hayes and David Manning as referees during the match. Hayes knocked out Flair, and what do you think what Michael Hayes would do? He knocking Ric Flair out and attempting to hand the pin and world title to Von Erich, but turned on Kerry when he refused the tainted victory. And as Kerry tried to leave the cage, Terry Gordy, let me tell you about this shit. Terry Gordy slammed the cage door on Kerry's head. Thus, the Von Erich Freebird feud was born. It was born though. David started taking part in what else did David do? He took part in many matches against the Freebirds in '83. In early '84, notable bouts include David versus Terry Gordy in a match. It's called a handcuff. It's called a handcuff match on April 1st of that year at the Wrestling Star Wars show. David, Kevin, and Kerry defeating the Freebirds on July 4th of '83 in Fort Worth, Texas, at Star Wars, and what would be David's next to last match against Terry Gordy, and on February 3rd of '84. February 3rd of 1984, on the same day, David defeated Hayes to win the NWA United National Championship, his last title ever. This title is now part of All Japan of AJPW, All Japan Pro Wrestling's Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. There's a feud with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. David won the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair in September 16th of '83, holding the championship until losing to Harley Race on January 6th of 1984. Many within the industry believe that David's reign with the belt was his final step to winning the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, as the NWA Championship Committee supposedly voted in January of '84 for David to win it from Flair in March or April of that year. Then an angle between David and Rick was started when David battled Flair at the Reunion Arena on December 25th of 1983, and Flair retained the NWA World Championship immediately afterwards on December 31st of 1983. That's New Year's Eve. This December 25th of 83 was around Christmas. It was on the NWA television broadcast. The NWA television broadcast, Ric Flair did an interview where he commented on how Mike Von Erich, rest in peace, was not a good wrestler, and he could beat Mike in 60 seconds with one hand tied behind his back. In an interview with Fort Worth on January 9th, my dad's 24th birthday at that period. My dad was in his 20s back then, you know. Uh, Especially on there, we got this interview thing. The interview that was on my dad's birthday on January 9th, 1984, when David did possibly his most intense interview ever by telling Flair that he had heard Flair's comments about Mike, and that he had a proposition that Mike would wrestle Flair. He would wrestle Flair in a match, like a 10-minute challenge match. And if Flair beat Mike in that 10 minutes, David would never again ask for another shot at the NWA World title as long as he lives. But if Flair did not beat Mike in those 10 minutes, David would get the name, to the place, and the time, and every stipulation for his match against Ric Flair in the 10-minute challenge match. Yeah, that's what it is. The 10-minute challenge match that was between Rick and Mike. That was held at the WCCW Wrestling Star Wars at the TCCC, the Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth, Texas, on January 30th of '84, when Flair was unable to pin Mike in the 10 minutes, and as a result, David won the challenge. A week later, on February 6th of 1984, in Fort Worth, in what would turn out to be his final interview, David Von Erich expressed his happiness over Mike lasting the 10 minutes with Ric Flair, and said that now he would get to name every single stipulation in David's return match with Flair. The big match was said to be held sometime in about April of that year, in 1984, after David was to return to Texas at the end of February, and he and Flair would have a chance to build the matchup even more. His last match was defeating the late great Kamala by disqualification in Ardmore, Oklahoma, on February 7th. We gotta go to his personal life right here. We gotta go to the personal life of David Adkisson. David Adkisson's personal life. We're going to his personal life right here. David's first marriage was with Candy L. McLeod. Candy L. McLeod or McLeod. The couple were wed on June 26, 1978, in Denton, Texas. Together, they had a daughter named Natosha. Zoanna Adkisson. She died of SIDS at 13 weeks old, shortly after David separated from his wife, and they were officially divorced on July  12th, 1979. David married for the second time on June 8th of 1982 to a Patricia A. Matter, who was known as Trisha, Tricia. The couple remained married until David's death. Trisha was interviewed for the June 1984 edition of the Wrestler magazine, which was a tribute to David. She spoke. She spoke of how she loved the fans and thanking them and thanking them for their support. Trisha Trisha was has remained out of the public's eye since that interview. And that's what tragedy struck. Von Erich, whose real name is Adkisson, died during a tour in All Japan Pro Wrestling (AJPW) on February 10th, 1984, before defending the United National Championship belt. He had won in Texas. 7 days earlier, one theory of his death is that it was a painkiller overdose, perhaps hydrocodone. Ric Flair mentions in his autobiography that Bruiser Brody, who was a longtime friend of Von Erich's, removed the evidence. The Von Erichs, however, claimed it was caused by a ruptured intestines, resulting in in acute enteritis, which is the documented cause of death listed on the consular report of death provided by the U.S. Embassy in Japan. In the documentary Heroes of World Class, the story of the Von Erichs and the triumph and tragedy of the name World Class Championship Wrestling. Kevin Von Erich was still alive, still the living Von Erich family member, and former referee David Manning, who was used to be a referee for the WCCW promotion, attested to a heart attack theory. The heart attack theory, according to a friend and a former promoter, who had to be the goon, who had to be Wild Bill Irwin, who had to be the goon, who had to be the goon. David is believed to have suffered from what they have said and called bulimia, bulimia, which Irwin alludes to in a 2017 Wrestling Shoot podcast on the was it the was on the was it the booking booking the territory YouTube channel. Man, tragic. All the accolades that this man has done, that David Von Erich have done, all the titles that he have won. Damn, I did not know this motherfucker died from all the drugs that he had took. I did not know that he died. He died from all the drugs that he had took. It shit hurts. That shit hurts. That shit hurts everybody, including Kevin Von Erich. It hurt. It hurt. It cut him though. It cut him. It cut all the members of Von Erich family who are no longer with us. One of those that were alive were Kevin. Had be Kevin Von Erich. But this man will always be known as a professional wrestler that could kick down the doors of the wrestling business. Like WCCW and CWF. You know what I mean? All in places. This man kicked down the doors of WCCW, CWF, and the WWF, which was now WWE. He kicked down those doors. Everything this man had done, would always can be brought into question. But that part would never been brought back. So, but the legacy of David Von Erich would still live on, bro. It will still live on forever. It will still live on. That's why I had to read the story to you people on YouTube, the YouTube viewers. I had to read this to you because it'll be a sentimental tribute in a story that could be told forever. I might go do a few more birthdays. I'm gonna do a few more birthdays in August. Do a few more of those birthdays in August. There's probably 4 or 5 of them, so I gotta do 4 or 5 of them. You know, I'll do 4 or 5 of them on in August. So gotta be brief. I'll be on that hiatus again. You know, I'll be on that hiatus. You know, until I'll be on that hiatus on some weeks until I had to go do until I had to do more birthdays. I'm gonna have to go watch off the script. Uh starting about now. See you in August.